I think we're recording.
Yes, you are.
Okay, hi, hello. Timmy Newsome, thank you so much for getting on this call today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, as you know, I've recently launched a company, Heirloom Digital, and we're a multimedia company focused on creating life stories and lasting legacies. And so I'm really just interested in talking to people who seem to live like their legacy matters. And clearly that is you. When we met, we were at a youth empowerment luncheon, and it was really, you were so humble, and I didn't realize exactly who I was speaking to, but I've learned a lot since, because you are a legend here in Dallas. You played for America's team under Coach Tom Landry, and in 2019 you were an inductee into the Black College Football Hall of Fame. And in 2021, now you're in the running for the 2021 College Football Hall of Fame. So it's just incredible.
Thank
And, in addition to that, though, you're just an amazing guy. I mean, you care about the same things I do, social impact and social justice issues. And then you run a successful business, Newtec Business Solutions. So I thought we'd just take a little bit of time, and you can tell me what makes Timmy tick.
Oh boy, it's all about drinking the water. That's all it is.
Well, we'll start with the obvious question, the thing everyone's probably dying to ask you, which is, what was it like playing for the Cowboys?
It was a wonderful experience. When I was coming out of college, I really didn't think they were going to draft me. In fact, there were a couple teams interested, but I didn't think the Cowboys were interested. But one of the things that's more remarkable about them is that they used to send me a lot of promotional material, marketing material, and I'd say 80% of it was of the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. And so my allegiance was really to the Green Bay Packers until I started getting all those centerfolds from the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, and I changed my allegiance real fast.
Oh, that is awesome.
But I still didn't think they were going to draft me. So I was lucky enough to go later in those rounds of doing the NFL draft, and they decided to select me, and I was a very happy man.
Well, they knew a good thing when they saw it. And, you're right about those cheerleaders. I remember when I was 6, I had a white satin jacket with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders logo on the back and the blue trim. And I just wore that thing for probably too long.
Oh.
And my son now has those same cheerleaders pictures on his wall.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah, they're an enduring set of brand ambassadors for sure.
It's one of those things where they were internationally recognized for being who they are. And so, I was just happy to be a part of that organization and have people revere them for who they are and what they represented.
Well, of course. And thank you for giving, all the players credit, including the other groups that are part of building that amazing brand. And as a businessman, I know you know how that matters. And I can't wait to get into that part of the discussion, because I think we have a lot of entrepreneurs who'd be just really great, happy to have your insights. But first, back to what makes a team great. We know good coaching is also a big part of it. And you played under the legendary coach Bill Hayes in college. So do you have any stories you want to share about how he may have impacted you in your life?
Well, he's a very positive person. When I was in Winston-Salem State University, the facilities weren't the best in the world. But in spite of that, he always put a positive spin on what we were trying to do athletically. And so 80% of his conversations with us was about being positive and staying positive. So in spite of that environment, we were able to win a lot of football games because of that positive attitude.
So you're telling me that positive attitude really works. I mean, it is hard when you look at a competitor and see somebody with so many more resources, and you're just like, how do I compete with that? And I'm hearing like a positive attitude from the leader really does make the difference.
Oh, it's huge. I would look around and see all the despair, but when I would go out on the football field or listen to him in a meeting, it was not something he ever talked about or discussed. He was only focused on the mission, and that was to win football games. And so that's what we were able to do.
Well, that's remarkable. And I can see that you have that trait. And, I look forward to hearing more about that. But continuing on the football side, what about during the Cowboys era for you under Coach Tom Landry, or your teammates even who made an impression?
Well, when I got to Dallas, it was a little bit different because everybody is so extraordinarily talented. And so I was a runner in college, and I ran a lot, and I was kind of like Dorsett was when he was in college. So we were both kind of doing the same things. But when I got here, he was a premier runner, so I had to take another role. And so they moved me to fullback, which is a position that most requires a lot of blocking and pass receiving. And so he was a premier runner, and I blocked for him a lot. And so it was a little bit of an adjustment, but once I understood what my role was, it was even easy for me to get into it and understand how to support the team in that way.
Yeah, it's so helpful to have clarity around roles. I mean, I've been in these situations where if I don't know what I'm doing there, it's just hard to know how to be effective. And so it's neat to hear that that mattered for you there. But also, what was unique that I read about your career was that you also pursued your studies in computer science. Is that right? While you were playing football?
Yeah, in those early days of professional sports, the salaries weren't nearly as abundant as they are now. For example, my base salary my rookie year was only $30,000. And in the off season, when I was working in technology, I was making probably about 30% more than that in technology. So it was something that we all did. I mean, not just me. A lot of guys did other things in the off season to supplement their salaries playing professional sports. So it wasn't until the early 90s that those salaries really began to escalate. But during the 1980s, we really needed a second job to support our families in that way.
Well, I mean, not everyone has a second career though, like you. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. How did you see anything commonalities between the game you played and this focus of study with computers?
Well, interestingly enough, when I was in college, I soon discovered that there was a lot of commonalities between football and computer science. And it's both surrounding the math. They're both mathematics. If you ever listen to plays being called in the huddle, it's basically a mathematical formula. And every guy has to decipher that formula and decide what they need to do for that instance. And computer science was much the same way. It's a very cryptic language, and you have to decipher what it is. So I soon discovered that they're both very similar in nature.
Well, that's fascinating. So when you kind of look back on your football career, obviously you have some accolades, that you have tons of them, and you're still getting recognition. Do you have any regrets though that you'd like to share, or anything, dark moments from that part of your life?
Well, athletically, the only regret that I have is that I wasn't able to be that premier runner for any sustained period of time. But let's give credit to Tony Dorsett. He never got hurt. And so he was always available on Sunday afternoon. I used to joke with him to take the weekend off, and he would never do it. But he was extremely durable. And so I was never able to, get enough carries in any particular game to sustain myself for any period of time. But having said that, I caught the ball a lot, and I provided some key blocking for him. And I also did some real tough running yards between the tackles. So it's not all bad, but if I had, if I look back on it, I would just like to have that opportunity to carry the ball about 25 or 30 times just once in my career.
Well, sure. I think it's just neat to hear kind of somebody who's reached the pinnacle of success in professional sports, what you might have done differently. But clearly you aren't somebody who focuses on what wasn't. I mean, you've moved far ahead and into a new career. So tell us about Newtec Business Solutions.
Well, while I was playing football, as you know, I was a computer programmer analyst. And what we did then is that I sold computer software to financial institutions, and we were selling automated teller machine software to those entities. And so once I retired, I decided to open up my own business called Newtec Business Solutions. And what we do today is provide managed services for the unified communications and collaborations products and services um, industry, where we take telephone systems and we take software and integrate those two, kind of like a call center environment. And we take those technologies and merge them so that people can transact business to their clients and stakeholders.
That sounds like the perfect solution for you. I mean, perfect setting for you to pick all these skills. You're obviously very strategic and you're a great systems thinker and you're a great leader. For those of us who can't follow all the technical side of what you're talking about, though, I know you have so much practical value that you bring to businesses. Could you just unpack that a little bit more for any business owners who might get to watch this and benefit from your services?
Well, I like to pride myself on being able to providing value to prospects and our clients. I really love taking the test to get certified in certain industries, like things for IBM, Cisco, Dell, Lenovo. I really love the certification aspect of it, to learn new things and stay current with the technologies. And so that value we bring to the table, to where we can take a lot of different technologies and merge them cohesively into one central unit, to where it increases efficiency and reduce the errors of what a business ordinarily would have without those technologies.
So you are integrating a number of different technologies and then helping people look at their offices holistically so that they can get better kind of service from their providers, or maybe just give us an example of how you improve the bottom line for a company.
Sure. So what we do is we take Office or Microsoft Office 365, we would install it into an environment, and then we will integrate all of the different technologies into that particular product. We'll integrate a phone system in it. We take internet service, we'll integrate that into it. We'll take a cloud-based vertical software and integrate into Microsoft Office 365. And so we take all those technologies and make it possible for people to transact business and play as though they're a major corporation. And so we reduce the errors by integrating those technologies with Microsoft. We're a Microsoft provider, and so we have uniquely, kind of positioned ourselves to help those businesses stay current and stay relevant in this ever-changing world of technology.
Well, that's needed. That's for sure. I mean, every time you turn around, there's something new to master. And for business owners, it's very difficult to keep pace with all of that. And I think we just need to look to people like you who could come in and consult and help overcome these barriers around, how to do it. It's just impossible to keep up with. So
Yeah.
who are your target client, kinds of companies that you work with?
Well, I'd like to tell people that it depends. I have a client that's only a 2-person office, but they may have a revenue in the millions. And then I have customers at 150 employees. And so it just varies. It just depends on the need of the customer. And so we look at that particular customer and see what kind of software need they may have. And then we try to tailor that particular software to the need of the customer. And so we do an analysis to try to determine the best fit. And that's kind of how we start that process.
Well, in this, I'm kind of hearing your same philosophy that I heard the day we met at the Youth Empowerment Luncheon. I just think you strike me as somebody who's very interested in formation of people, making them better, whether it's entities or people, certainly youth. And shift gears and tell us about what drives you in that work.
Well, it's interesting. My mother was a school teacher. And so, but aside from that, she was always community service focused. And so I learned a lot from her, watching her do certain things. And whenever someone would come to see her to ask for some sort of assistance, one of the things she would always end with, she says, now make sure your child stays in school. And one day I just kind of asked her, I said, when you provide these services to people, you don't charge them anything. I said, why? she said, well, because one, we don't need the money, and two, I want to make sure that their child is learning and stays in school. So she said, that's my contract to them. I'm not going to charge you for what service I just provided, but I want you to make sure your child stays in school. And so she was really philanthropic in that way, in helping those other parents' kids do the things that they needed to do to have a really good education. And so I saw that growing up. And so I just tried to amplify a little bit of it as I began to matriculate through college and then later on in my professional life.
Oh, your mom would be so proud of you.
Well, I hope so.
It's just amazing. So is she still with us? Is she?
No. She passed in 2009.
Well, I just lost my mom, recently, and I know exactly what you mean. It's like sometimes you don't think at the time how much they're influencing you, and then you look back and realize, oh, wow, I was just kind of following what they showed me. And I think as so many people wonder, oh, well, do I have a legacy, or is that something that I can do too? It's like, of course, everybody who has any guiding set of principles in our lives and somebody at least to share that with, or some way they exhibit that in the community, is leaving a legacy. And clearly your mother made a huge impact on the world, not only in her own work, but now through you.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly, a lot of what I ended up doing at Winston-Salem State University and being able to overcome that adversity to some extent, I learned from my parents. And so my father was an automobile mechanic and a farmer. And so I spent a lot of time working with him and seeing how he operated his businesses and did the things that he did. And we would talk a lot. And so he loved football. It was a sport that I didn't particularly like growing up. Baseball was really my sport, but it didn't hit me and it didn't come, strike home until I was a senior in high school. And he kind of set me down and talked to me about the value of the opportunity that I could have and not to blow it. And so I tried not to.
So it sounds like your family then would you say they were key to your success? They're a big part of who you became in your life?
Oh, no question at all. I mean, my parents were very quiet supporters of me. For example, my mother only saw me play football in high school maybe once. She saw me play in college probably 3 or 4 times, and she would only come see me play professional football once a year. So, but they were always very supportive of what I was having to think about doing and what I did. So they were always there to provide that guidance, but they did it kind of from a distance. And whenever I asked for some advice, they'd give it to me. If I didn't ask for it, they didn't give it.
Well, what were some of the core values that they passed on to you, or the ones that you just choose to own today? If you wanted to name 3 or 4 things that you look to as your, how do you describe the moral compass that you have in your life?
My parents are very pragmatic. And what I mean by that is that I could never con them in doing something that I wanted to do. For example, I wanted a mini bike, which is a little motorized bike. And so I did everything I could to convince them that I would be safe. It would be no problem. And, and in unison, they said, no, it's too risky. It's something you really don't need to have. Plus, where I grew up, there were not a lot of my friends who had those kinds of machines. So I would probably have to be loaning it out to everybody, and they understood that. And so they didn't think I needed it. It didn't fit the neighborhood, so I wasn't going to get it. And that was just the way it was. So it was hard to con them. And so, but they were very pragmatic in that way.
Well, I definitely see that in you too. And that goes back to just, examining a lot of different things and deciding what will work for the setting or the person. So on the youth empowerment front, what's the biggest issue that has you concerned, here in DFW or anywhere, about the future of the youth in America?
Well, obviously education is at the forefront, and receiving a quality education. There's a huge digital divide between people who live in poverty and people who live in affluence. And if we're experiencing that now with the pandemic. you know, people are trying to go virtual. Well, there's a problem with that because people who live in poverty don't necessarily have those tools to do virtual learning. And even if they did, sometimes that person in home at the home may not have the skill sets to do the kind of instruction that a school can do. And so that's a very tough issue to try to come to grips with when you're having to tell kids, well, there's virtual learning and classroom learning. And so that's a very tough issue, and it's one that's going to really define who and what we are for the next few months, certainly as schools begin to open.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's devastating to know already that Dallas is the highest in inequality in the nation. We have a divide in so many ways. I mean, the economic divide, as you know, is just staggering between the southern sector of Dallas and North Dallas. And then you have on top of it this digital divide. And then now the divide that will happen when children who don't get educated during the next, even if you lag by a year, you know, let's say the next year is affected materially, their whole education and future could be affected. And so I'm really glad somebody like you is paying attention to that. I'm curious if Newtec Business Solutions is doing any kind of corporate responsibility work around the digital divide, since you have, you know, so much knowledge about technology.
Well, I belong to an organization called Children at Risk, and we just released a statement concerning this issue. And so from that vantage point, we are trying to make sure that the people who are responsible for making these decisions understand of the critical nature that is confronting them when it comes to the digital divide and people who are living in poverty. And so hopefully, as we move through this process, we take special care and try to find creative ways not to leave that segment of our economy and the youth behind, so that we can begin to continue to look at ways to help them during this period.
That's fantastic. I mean, Children at Risk does such good work and publishing. I know from the small amount I know of them, they publish the results of schools all over Texas, so parents can figure out where they can send their children and get the optimal education. So it sounds like you know how to partner with groups to get things done. I mean, you're partnering with nonprofits to do a lot of this work. What do you have any kind of final words for those who may be watching this, who want to be like you, want to be a leader, make a difference? You know, maybe they haven't had all the highlights you have in your career, but you might have some, you know, guidance for us.
Wow, that's kind of hard to explain in the next few seconds.
I'll give you a few minutes. At least as long as my question took me to ask you.
Oh, that's true. But, you know, I think the thing that's important is to stay focused on the things that are important, not get distracted by a lot of the noise that, you know, that inevitably is going to, you know, move in and out of our lives. One of the things that I really thought that I did very well growing up, and even at Winston-Salem State, and even when I got to the Dallas Cowboys, is staying focused on what it was that was really important to me, and not get too distracted by things that are inconsequential. And that's hard to do, and it's hard to say, and it's hard to do. And so, but staying focused is really the main ingredient, and trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do with my life, and then have some meaning to it. So that focus is very, very important.
Well, absolutely. I mean, some people are really focused on their TV. So, I mean, there are ways to be focused on the right things. And I think that's the follow-up question I have for you is, how do you get focused on the right things, that core mission? How do you stay connected to that?
Well, I read a lot, and I take what I read and try to digest what's important to me. You know, even though technology was not what I had intended to do coming out of high school, I soon realized that it was the future. And so I found a way to really love it, where when I started out, I didn't think I loved it as much, but I thought it was necessary for me to get to know it and do it very well. You know, people talk about sports and athletes in a certain reverence, but you know, what they don't realize is what we do when the cameras aren't on. There's a lot of things that we do that we don't particularly like to do, but we know it's a means to an end. And so if there's something that's going to be productive that we can do that we may not like, just understand that there is that end game that's going to be something that's going to be very fruitful if we just stay focused to get there. And sometimes people don't like that work that it takes to get there, and they just get sidetracked trying to figure out what they really like without having that real goal.
Well, I just got an important pep talk from Timmy. I feel like it was really meaningful because you live like that. I mean, you took on this position that you didn't really know how to play. And then same with the technology opportunity. You knew it was an opportunity, but you had to kind of grow into it and grow your interest, or the interest that grew out of the knowledge base that you created for yourself. So, I mean, really, just thank you for those insights. It's already clear to me why you're as successful as you are.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's not easy. It takes work, but it takes some critical thinking to try to figure out what is important and what that end game is. So it's kind of like Denzel Washington said about making a movie. There's some movies he makes to make money, and there's some movies he will do because it has meaning to him. But in order to do those movies that have real meaning, he has to do those other movies that may not be as meaningful, but it gets him to another place at certain times in his life. And so that's really what growing is all about. It's how can you grow not liking something that you don't particularly want to do, but it's good to do it. And so that's really the key.
Oh, that's a beautiful example. I mean, yeah, so much of what we do in the social impact world too is not, it's very difficult to come up with metrics that, oh yes, this is working, or here's the impact, you know, this is creating. A lot of times it's just walking in faith that you're making some kind of difference because you feel led to do it, or called to do it. And sometimes you just never really get to find out. But the balancing act that you do between, you know, practical business and growing success in that, and then on the community side, is just a really good way to model how to successfully make an impact in your community without kind of, you know, losing sight of anything material that you want to create in the world.
Well, yeah, that's very true. I mean, it encourages me when I go out and meet people, because I get to learn a lot about how they do things. And so I can go to South Dallas and make a speech, or I can go up to McKinney and make a speech, and I could say the exact same things and get a different reaction. And so that helps me understand the nature of how I present what I have to say to people, and then tailor it to that particular environment. And so it's a unique opportunity for me to grow and learn when I have to go out and meet people. And so I learn a lot from that. And it takes me to another place that I appreciate. And when I wake up in the morning, I say, okay, this day is going to be great for this reason. Not that I'm going to like it, but it's going to be in my best interest to go out there and do something to make that difference.
So you even set an intention for each day.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's something I need to try. So, I mean, I'm curious to know, you said that you get different reactions from people depending on the audience. For the people who are living in more impoverished neighborhoods, what are the needs or the felt kind of things that you get from them that you think they want in terms of help or could benefit from, that maybe they're not asking the rest of us, but they might voice it to you because you're there and you're interested in them?
Well, you know, what I've been able to observe, and this is just my own non-scientific observation, people who live at or below the poverty line have to have a lot of their day go right to feel confident that they're making progress. So if they were given 10 things to do and they did 9 things right and that one thing wrong, that one thing can really destroy their day. Whereas people of affluence would flip that and say, okay, today I had really 9 great things happen to me, and I'm not going to worry about that one thing that didn't. And that's what I see the differences are between people who live in affluence and people who live in poverty. And so in order to help that part of the population, you're going to have to be almost 100% right most of the time, so that they can learn that that one thing that didn't go well is okay. It's okay to say, all right, well, this one didn't work, but these other 8 or 9 things did. Now I'm making progress. And that's the difference that I've seen.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, so many of us are surrounded by benefits we don't even recognize. You know, even the digital things that we have in our homes that enable us to have calls like this so easily. But then also the networks, the support, all of those things. So it sounds like if we do want to make a difference, it'd be difficult not to, because they all need so many things. There's plugging in and giving back in even one way could be significant for someone if you're really serious about helping them. Would you say?
Oh, no question. I mean, even in the National Football League, we have what's called the NFL Player Care Program. And within that program, there are probably 25 different things that we could seek assistance on. And they recognize what I was just alluding to, is that in order to help people who have mental health challenges, then you can't just send them to a psychologist and say, sit down and let's talk. No, I've got to be able to find out how to get my kids to school in the morning. I've got to figure out how to provide health care. I've got to, maybe talk to an attorney. I might need to talk to a banker. All of these things will help prevent the crisis that sometimes will happen in just daily life. And so they recognize that basic function of humanity and say, we're going to do everything in our power to solve every single problem that you might have. And that's kind of the result of years of understanding the people that they're trying to serve.
What an incredible program. I mean, they would have phenomenal convening power, taking all these different talented people who could each on their own just fill one small piece of the bigger puzzle and truly make a difference. I think that's deeply inspiring. So just to wrap up, I mean, this is, a series on legacy and leadership. Do you have any final advice on either of those topics that you want to share for people who want to be a leader and leave a legacy?
Well, one of the common traits of all of my coaches that I've ever played with, and they were all successful, they were all in the Hall of Fame in their respective divisions, is that they were great listeners. They knew how to listen. And so whenever they were faced with a challenge, the one thing they did, they just kind of kept quiet and they listened to the concerns of the people who they were charged to lead. And so listening is a very lost art form in this day and age, but I think that's one of the qualities that all those great coaches had, is they had the ability to listen.
This is the second day in a row I've heard that same advice. I had a chance to speak to journalist Bob Rice-Anders yesterday on the set of a documentary we're doing, and he's a phenomenal veteran reporter, and said the exact same thing about the lost art of listening. So that's just very good advice that you've just given us. I'm so grateful for all of this, Timmy. I thank you for what you do to give back to everybody who asks.
Oh, thank you for having me, and look forward to maybe visiting with you in person one of these days.
Well, you'll be hearing from me soon about Newtec Business Solutions services, because I know some companies that should be talking to you very soon.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. We'll see you. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.